Welcome to Farm Here Daily, a Field Forward podcast. I'm your host, David Geiger. Today on Farm Here Daily, we check out a recent trip by the U.S. Meat Export Federation to South Korea. Becca Ahrendsen with Iowa Corn was there and saw the impact of U.S. products. Then a chat with Reese Drenth of the Ground Level Dispatch about Argentina's export decisions and how that affects U.S. producers. Please be sure to like and follow the podcast as well as our social media at Field Forward Pod. We would love to have you join our community, keeping folks informed about what is affecting our farmers. This is Farm Here Daily. And joining me on Farm Here Daily, we're going to take a look at some of the export front we have here in the U.S. And an unlikely part of the U.S. Meat Export Federation is, in fact, corn and grain growers. And joining us to talk a little bit about that and some of the trade missions they've been on is Becca Ahrendsen, the Market Development Manager with the Iowa Corn Growers Association. Becca, thank you so much for joining me on Farm Here Daily. And tell us, you guys were in, I think, South Korea pretty recently.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be with you. But yes, we were actually in South Korea. We saw Seoul, South Korea, as well as Busan. We went to a coastal town as well. And just really were able to dive deep into that market. Obviously, it's an important one for beef and pork. They import a lot of U.S. beef and pork. And so with their high population and just influx of people, it makes for an appealing market for U.S. pork and beef producers and corn producers as well.
We know our corn production, a big chunk of that will go to our livestock producers for pork and beef production. And in fact, it's a part of our ethanol production too. DDG is very important for that protein needed to grow really good, well-fed cattle for good beef. And so how is it part of this conversation as you went over there, taking into account the need for grain production?
Absolutely. Yes, just making sure we brought home that message of corn-fed protein. I think a lot of people sometimes have the assumption of grass-fed will be more healthy for me, or I don't need grain-fed. And really, when you have that tasting profile, you have people taste grass-fed versus corn-fed, soybean-fed, you taste the difference. So the folks over there, when we saw our U.S. beef or U.S. pork labels, even some of our grain labeling, Iowa corn, Illinois corn, things like that, you knew that people were gravitating towards that, whether it was Costco, some of these other marketplaces. And that just instills more confidence in us as producers over here that we know people have the appetite for that overseas as well. But it is a high quality protein source, and we're able to kind of kill two birds with one stone. Obviously, ethanol is a very big deal for our state, but then also getting that byproduct of DDGs is another fantastic option.
So tell me about this trip to South Korea. I believe it was called the Heartland Tour.
Yes.
And what did you learn? What was the reception you got as a part of this delegation from the U.S. Meat Export Federation?
Absolutely. We were comprised of a group all across the heartland, essentially, up and down the Mississippi River. We had folks from Texas, Cattlemen's Beef Board representatives, Illinois pork, Illinois corn, Nebraska corn, and we had even North Dakota soybean, just all these different folks that came over and really wanted to see U.S. beef and pork in action and actually out in the marketplace. So like I mentioned, we went to a Costco and we just saw so many coolers and retail that had U.S. beef lined up. And so it was really cool for a lot of our cattle producers and pork producers to get some pictures with those. We also saw some U.S. Meat Export Federation actual activities or market activities happening in Costco. So you could try a sample of U.S. beef and they'd cook it up for you, or U.S. pork. So that was a very neat experience. But then also seeing their distribution process. You think about Amazon Prime, like, dang, that's so fast to click a button and it's literally here the next day. In South Korea, they have a crazy, an even crazier supply chain of they can order their groceries at 11:59, and at 6 in the morning your groceries will be there, whether it's US beef, US pork, all the things that you need, milk. And so a lot of people are using that fast way to get their products to their doorstep. So it was really cool to see the distribution of that, how that all works, and just how technologically advanced and sound they are as a culture too. Was really neat.
It is a massive city and a big importer of U.S.
Yes.
products. Um, I want to talk about the broader impact of U.S. exports because obviously it's a great place for us to sell what we make and to
Mhm.
show off what we do. But it goes even more so. There's more benefits than that. I mean, something like South Korean barbecue is becoming very popular. I mean, even in Des Moines, you can
Yes.
find a South Korean joint, get some bulgogi beef,
Yep.
and that is a part of our exports there. And then they
Mhm.
can show us some of their cool foods that they make back here. Did you try some of that over there? Did you try some of that South
Absolutely.
Korean barbecue?
Yes. Yes. I would say I'm not the best chopstick expert, so sometimes I would have to break the fork out. But no, Korean barbecue, we had that several times. And yeah, just seeing how they really make a full plate, a full platter of just all different types of meats, and just again different cuts that still taste so good. We're used to obviously steaks or something really nice, pork chop, different things like that, but they will take anything and make that into something high quality and good to eat, obviously for their families, and they care a lot about their health as well. So that them as consumers are being conscientious of that, that just makes you feel as a US producer even better, knowing that they don't have any reservations on, is this healthy for me, can I feed it to my kids, different things of that sort.
I'm gonna throw a bit of a wild card question at you here.
Yeah.
A while back, I actually made a documentary where I followed a soybean planted here in the U.S. all the way to a product over in South Korea. It's called doenjang. So I followed that process, and so I went to South Korea for a couple weeks myself, and they make some really great products over there from U.S. Production.
Yeah.
Any chance you talked about corn specifically over there, and any uses that they may have for U.S. grains or corn in that
Yeah.
specialty?
Yeah, no, that is a great question, and something I should have asked more on, because at Iowa Corn for new uses, like we're looking into technologies for your clothing, right? So maybe that's something too that they are capitalizing over there. I do know that for DDG's perspective, they do import some of our US DDGs as well, and they will feed those to their Hanu cattle, and so.
Really?
Yes, and I believe it's Hanu is how you pronounce it, but
That sounds
um
right to me.
yes, that is like their highest quality cut that they will want. Obviously US beef is up there as well, but like if they're going out for dinner for something very, very, very nice and they want to spend the money, they're going to spend it on that Hanu, which was just fascinating learning about that and how their cattle production works over there as well. But they're mostly fed US DDGs. So we were able to see or learn more about like that process as well, but we did try it, and it was very good. But I will say I will pick US beef over that anytime.
Absolutely. It's always nice to try different cultures and see what they have to make, but sometimes familiar is best, and we do enjoy the products that we make here in the U.S. And, that's an interesting aspect of South Korean culture because it is such a mountainous region. They literally do not have enough land to produce their own amount of food. So if they are going to be growing their own cattle or finishing their own cattle, they have to use products like corn
Right.
because they can't graze them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was great point that USMEF briefed us on when they were talking about those cattle, is that they're all, relatively in a confinement. They're not grazing or anything of that sort throughout their life. Like they are mostly confined. So that was an interesting fact that I had no idea about. So
Always fun to learn a little bit more on that. As kind of a final takeaway, this Heartland tour and some of the opportunities that were given from this delegation there, what would you like to just talk about to folks here, farmers here, about that importance of international visits, delegations, and association?
for sure. I think it's just really important to make sure that our messaging is obviously getting out there to those international markets and being able to travel with actual producers. Majority of the group was also producers. And so anytime that they can tell their story and describe how it impacts their family, them feeding their pork and beef to their families, like they trust that, they fully trust that product. And so I think anytime they can tell that story, it resonates with an international audience because that's the type of common ground we share. We're all people. So I think building that rapport is super important, but also just, I mean, right now in ag, I feel like it is a little bleak at times. And so, if we're able to capitalize on some of those international markets and just ensure that we're building those relationships up positively, that's the most important bottom line. And obviously, domestically, we want to capitalize on things too, but those international partners and partnerships are very important. So.
Becca Ahrendsen is the market development manager with Iowa Corn. She recently went on a South Korea visit with a U.S. Meat Export Federation delegation. Becca, thank you so much for joining us today on Farm Your Daily.
Thank you.
This is Farm Your Daily. We will have more conversations on the way, but first, let's take a look at the marketplace. There was some red on the board at the close for Wednesday. December corn down 2 cents, 4.24 and a quarter, with March falling 2 cents at 4.41. Soybeans in November 3 cents weaker at 10.09, with January a decrease of 3 1/4 at 10.28 and a half. Soybean meal in October $3.40 a ton in the red, $271.70. While soybean oil in October is about a tenth of a penny lower, $49.29 a pound. December wheat down a cent at 5.19 and a half, with March also a penny weaker, 5.38. Hard red winter wheat in December 4 3/4 down at 5.06 3/4, with March 4 1/4 lower at 5.28 1/4. It was also red across the board in livestock as well at the close on Wednesday. October live cattle down $1.55 a hundredweight, 234.05. December falling $1.92 at 236.82. Feeder cattle in October, $2.50 a hundredweight weaker at 359.62, with November $2.95 down at 357.80. Lean hogs in October, $1.10 a hundredweight lower, $99.42, with December falling $2.60 at $88.12 a hundredweight. That is the Wednesday market close. This is Farm Your Daily. And joining me on Farm Your Daily, we're going to take a look at some of the international aspects we've been seeing here in the marketplace. And to do so, we have Reese Drenth with the Ground Level Dispatch. And we chat with Reese about once a week or so. And the Ground Level Dispatch is something we talk with quite a bit as well. And let's jump right into Argentina. Past week, we got some news. They were doing some export changes, and that was a bit unexpected, I thought. Was it unexpected to you?
Yeah, thanks for having us. Always appreciate being on here every week. Big story in the marketplace, yeah, with Argentina. We've just taken a lot of body blows, especially when it comes to soybeans over the last couple months as we prep for harvest. And then we have this body blow, which is the Argentinian government eliminating export taxes on grains and oilseeds and oilseed processing byproducts. What does that mean? Argentina, first of all, if you're a farmer in Argentina, when you sell soybeans, you're selling it to the state. You're selling it to the government. And the government takes those soybeans and they trade them almost immediately. And the reason why they do that is because they need US dollars. Okay, so like even though some other countries are trying to change that, US dollars are still the unit of measure for, or the unit of transaction for export purchases across the globe. They need dollars because their economy sucks, right? I mean, it's as simple as that. They need more dollars. So why does Argentina eliminate export taxes on all these ag products? Is to try and incentivize farmer selling, so they can take the beans, they can sell them to whoever the highest bidder is, and they can collect dollars. The Argentinian farmer typically doesn't store a lot of corn, but they store a lot of beans. They store a lot of beans for two reasons. One, Argentina is the largest exporter of soybean meal in the globe. So usually the processors make it worth their while to store beans when they harvest because they're always paying up for them. The other reason they store beans is a hedge against their very, very weak currency. Okay, so if you have massive inflation in a country like Argentina, and you have expensive commodity like soybeans laying around, the basic rules of inflation tell you that physical goods go up when there's inflation. If I'm a farmer and I'm holding on to soybeans and there's a bunch of inflation, at least I know out the back I've got some sort of protection against super high inflation in my country, because I know that eventually someone's going to pay me for those beans because we're going to need to export them so we can try to fight inflation as a country. So it's like kind of this very interesting cycle that they're in. And, on a different note, thank God we farm and we live in the United States of America, because we're not having to deal with a lot of those similar economic issues that Argentinian farmers have to deal with. But when they take these export taxes off to try and collect dollars from the global market to fight their own economic struggles as a country, the market expects Argentinian farmers to sell. And sometimes, like over the past in 2012, 24 months, Argentina's messed with, okay, we'll take our export taxes down a little bit for this window, or we'll take our export taxes down a little bit more for this window. They've never really just eliminated them for a certain period of time. So now we go from, like, I think it's a 26% tax when you sell grain to the government versus no tax. It's a big deal.
That's a huge deal.
A huge deal.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the Argentinian farmers sold the crap out of it. We saw soybean values in Argentina drop. I was reading this morning that if you're a Brazilian buyer of beans, in a matter of days now, it makes sense to buy beans in Argentina, put them through in Brazil, and then either crush them or export them in Brazil. That's how cheap they got. And they got that cheap because the farmers sold the bejesus out of them. And then on the flip side, the government, I think the tally's up to, if you believe, some of the wires that you read, 20 plus cargoes of beans sold to China, which is abnormal, because usually the Chinese are buying soybean meal from Argentina, not necessarily physical soybeans. So that's another body blow, right? And you saw in the soybean market, in a matter of days, we've kind of been chopping around higher, right? There's been maybe some positive news, and maybe yields were up in the air. We've been chopping around right around the 100, 200-day moving averages, and we really weren't kind of budging about off that 1030, 1040 level. Well, in a matter of days, you broke through all that chart resistance, and you've got further downward pressure now because we keep losing export business. So it's not a great setup for soybeans right now. And like that, it wasn't before that happened. And then when that was announced, it's just another punch we got to roll with for bean producers in the soybean export industry. And it's kind of brutal.
So what you're saying is essentially there was this built up expectation that, we're dealing with an issue here with China, but they'll have to buy US beans eventually because they need to make it all the way until Brazil starts selling again. But with this influx of soybeans, now they can delay potentially even more as they continue to negotiate with the US. Or was that just kind of like a generality that I'm inferring there?
Well, quietly or not quietly, if you walk it back 6, 8, 12 months, the Chinese have been signing agreements with both Brazil and Argentina to do more export business, ever since the 2024 election cycle. It's kind of a hedge against whatever was to come, in my opinion. And the reality is that China, as the biggest market for soybeans in the world, they're trying to shore up a few other avenues of reliance of soybean purchasing, and it seemed to have done that successfully. Now, Brazil grew a massive bean crop. They had great weather, and Argentina had great weather too. Like, that's step one. If they don't have great weather down there for their production in the, iffy soil that they grow all these beans in, then, who cares if you sign all these agreements? The beans just aren't there, right? But they had good weather. The beans are there. Now they're taking advantage of the agreements that they've signed. So, like, to answer your question, does China need U.S. beans? They might buy a little to bridge the gap between here and Brazil. And there's several months, right? We got to get through October, November, December, January, and most of February, right, before Brazil really starts shipping new crop beans, the beans that are going in the ground right now, or they're capable of that. So, like, there's plenty of time, and that crop could burn up. It could flood. Who knows? But at this juncture, a lot of people think they bought all their November, September, October, and November needs, which leaves about 2.5 months maybe where the U.S. might have a role. The longer this goes on, the longer we keep taking body blows, the longer the Chinese delay and buy somewhere else, the less they need, the less impact it'll have on the market if and when they do start buying beans. If they only need a little bit, who cares? We got way too many. In a snap of a finger, we've got too many in the U.S. So that's the market conditions. And I know that's a very negative thought process story, but those are the market conditions we're fighting right now in the bean complex.
So with those as the market conditions, what are we looking at here in terms of pricing for the future? Soybeans are above $10 still, and obviously that's not, making tons of money on that. I mean, they could definitely stand to be a lot higher with the input prices we have for farmers to actually make money. But that also could potentially go lower, or is it kind of stable right now because this is really the minimum that you really can sell soybeans?
Well, the one thing we haven't talked about yet is yield, right? That's the other component. If China doesn't buy any beans on the U.S. balance sheet, right? If our beans go from, or if our bean exports go from, we're expecting close to 1.7 billion bushels of exports down to 1.5 billion bushels. Well, if the national yield goes from 53, like we're expecting, down to 50 or 51, doesn't matter, right? If the yield's there, then can the bottom fall out of this bean market? Maybe. If the yield's there, we have no exports, there's probably no reason to have 10.50 beans. There's certainly no reason to have $11 beans. If the yield's not there, different story. You can still get a shot at, $11 beans if we have good biofuel policy here that's, proactive or that's pro biodiesel and soybean crush. If you have a few weather hiccups in South America, like, there's still opportunity, right? Anything can happen in commodity markets. But the good thing, and the point I want to mention about soybeans, is there are massive carries in the market. So what is a carry? A carry, it means that something is worth more later than it is worth now. So if you just look like at bean futures, November is at 9.10, call it right now. July bean futures are at 10.70. Okay, basically 60 cents a bushel of carry in soybean futures. So, our recommendation at this juncture, we've kicked off bean harvest maybe a little bit, but they were way too dry, and then now, after some rain, it's too wet. Next week we'll probably be like hammer down on soybean harvest in a lot of areas, right? Do we want to make sales at these prices knowing what we know? Not nearby, not off the combine. That would not be our recommendation. Our recommendation would be, if you want to manage some risk, if you're thinking, man, I'm listening to Reese talk, and he's not saying anything good about beans. Maybe I should sell a few beans. Do not do that for October delivery or November delivery. Look forward. Look towards December, January, February, June, July. Maybe just lock in futures and do what the market's telling you to do, which is sell forward, right? Versus selling today at pretty cheap futures and very, very, very cheap basis because we have no export program. Eventually, someone's going to need beans. Like we crush a massive amount of beans in this country. So U.S. beans are so cheap, someone in the world is still going to buy them. Like basis will get better. That's just how markets work. Basis is demand. Somebody somewhere is going to be like, man, I need to buy some beans here or I'm going to run out. Basis will get better. Futures, obviously that's where a lot of risk is. That's right up the air. And the good news again is that we have carry in the marketplace. So if you feel like maybe I should manage some risk, sell forward. Look at the carry in the market and sell forward. Don't sell beans off the combine. Now, if you have the means, that would be our recommendation.
Reese Drenth is with the Ground Level Dispatch, and Reese, you guys send out notes every day and also on the weekends. If folks were to sign up and take a look at the link below and try out a month free trial with you all, what would they expect to see?
Yeah, great question. We do send out grain commentary twice a day, once early in the morning, once towards mid to late afternoon. Try to keep it very simple, short and sweet. Try to get to the important stuff, get you about your day. When there is big stuff going on, we'll try to add some color where we see fit, but trying to eliminate the bog of information that is out there with grain commentary. And then, on the weekends, try to put out 2 to 3 input or other interesting topic articles out every month. And we had one last month with a deeper dive, last weekend, a little bit deeper dive in fertilizer markets, which is obviously super, super important on everybody's mind also. So give us a try.
Reese Drenth, the Ground Level Dispatch. Try out that month free trial in the link description below this podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today on Farm Your Daily.
No problem.
This is Farm Your Daily, a Field Forward podcast. Thank you for listening. Again, in order to continue to produce this type of local content, we would love to have you join our community. So please follow the podcast as well as our social media channels at Field Forward Pod. You can also find me on social media at Geiger Reports. Again, I am your host, David Geiger, and I'll be back again tomorrow, everybody.